The most powerful weapon created by the Arab and Muslim states against Israel wasn't a tank, a missile, an army, or even a Soviet MiG. It was the creation of the perpetual refugee. Before you lose your minds, listen carefully to what I'm saying. Normally, the objective following a refugee crisis is obvious. End the refugee crisis. Resettlement, citizenship, compensation, a permanent future. But this creates a problem. A refugee who becomes a citizen and builds a permanent future stops being a geopolitical weapon, while a refugee taught that his children and his children's children are still temporarily displaced and one day will return and destroy Israel remains part of the conflict forever. Arab and Muslim dictators who needed an external enemy, Soviet strategists who needed a weapon against America, Palestinian leaders whose power and wealth depended upon permanent struggle, and extremists for whom compromise meant defeat. Everyone benefited from perpetuating the conflict against Israel except the Palestinians. So a plan was hatched. A separate United Nations agency, UNRWA, was established for Palestinian refugees only. UNRWA began caring for approximately 750,000 Arabs. Today, that number is nearly 6 million Palestinians because, unlike all other refugees in the history of the world, Palestinian descendants can also be registered as refugees. Think about that. More than 3/4 of a century after the war that created the refugee population didn't disappear, it multiplied by 8. This is what I believe the world fundamentally misunderstands about this conflict. The Palestinians became enormously useful to powers whose interests weren't the interests of ordinary Palestinians. For Arab regimes, Israel became the perfect scapegoat. Instead of their own populations asking why they lived under dictatorships, corruption, and poverty, there was always someone else to blame: the Zionists. And after 1967, the Soviets recognized the opportunity as well. They opened another front in the Cold War battlefield against the U.S. by fueling anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish propaganda and providing weapons, training, money, and diplomatic cover to the Palestinians. And who paid the greatest price for all of this? The Palestinians. Generation after generation was told, don't give up the struggle. Don't accept compromise. Hold on to the keys, the deeds. One day you're going back. One day Israel will be gone. And that's the cruel genius of turning an unresolved refugee crisis into a weapon. Because if refugees are permanently resettled and build new lives, the refugee crisis ends. But if their children and their children's children, if generations become refugees, the conflict never ends. So no, the Arab world's greatest weapon against Israel was never its armies. Those armies failed time after time. The far more effective weapon was ensuring the War of Independence could never become history. The cruelest part, the people carrying the burden, they weren't sitting in presidential palaces in Moscow, Cairo, Damascus, or Baghdad. They were Palestinians. They deserved leaders interested in building them a future. Instead, they got leaders who needed to keep them fighting an unwinnable, unjust war of attrition. I'm a proud Jew. I'm a proud Zionist. Am Yisrael Chai.